right person to run it. I happen to know a gentleman who worked for InfoWars who covered migration in Europe issues related to migration. So that gentleman, the board approved, Mr. Dan Lyman, and he became the editor-in-chief 5 years ago of BorderHawk News. And it's been a tremendous ride, not just for Dan, I believe, but for everyone who's impacted by the website. So I proudly welcome you, Mr. Dan Lyman.
Thank you so much. We're going to go with the mic because eventually we're going to be rolling some videos and I'll be competing with the volume there. But I just want to, first of all, thank all of you for coming out tonight. It's my understanding this is the biggest ERG meeting to date, which is fantastic. So, round of applause for all the organizers at ERG. Round of applause for yourselves, all the candidates that showed up, and of course all of our great speakers here tonight. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. I came up from Florida to visit the family, and it's nice that it worked out that we can do this. And talk about what is the #1 issue, in my opinion, and now becoming a #1 issue facing the country and the Western world. As he mentioned, my name is Dan Lyman. I'm the editor-in-chief and the president of BorderHawk. I'm also a correspondent for InfoWars. As many of you will probably know, InfoWars could be on its last legs here. The powers that be have been coming after us for a while, and it's not looking good. And it's probably going to be one of the first times that a very successful, profitable and effective news organizations could be shut down, effectively by the state, but through lawfare. So we're hanging on by a thread, but right now, we definitely would appreciate your prayers to get through these difficult times. I was the bureau chief for InfoWars Europe for many years. I was living in Iceland and Switzerland for many years, and so I was covering a lot of immigration issues in Europe. I moved back to the US a couple of years ago. Have been living here and have really shifted my focus back to what's going on here in the country. And I do cover a lot of immigration issues for InfoWars. Alex lets me do whatever I want, so I'm just like the immigration guy at InfoWars. You'll find my work there every day. And that works out really nicely because I'm able to kind of weave BorderHawk's work back and forth between InfoWars, get additional exposure, go on our shows and talk about these things in both capacities. So that's where I'm at, that's why I'm here. And so she gave a little intro to what BorderHawk is, but recently I was preparing to speak at the VDARE conference at their castle in West Virginia a couple of months ago. And ahead of that conference, I was notified by the communist cretins at the SPLC that they were working on a hit piece about me and BorderHawk. They posed a handful of inflammatory, disingenuous questions, which I perused, had a good laugh over, and disregarded. The article came out a few days later, and I thought it would be entertaining to introduce you all to BorderHawk through the warped lens of the SPLC. As having these smear pieces written about me and my organization are badges of honor, they're rites of passage in this battle against the evil forces machinating against Western civilization and its native populations on a daily basis. So these are the words of the SPLC. An immigration news aggregator website making inroads with mainstream conservative outlets for its reporting on border issues is pushing bigoted conspiracy theories. BorderHawk.news is a news and article aggregator platform with connections to the organized anti-immigrant network founded by the late John Tanton, aforementioned, a white nationalist and eugenicist who is credited as being the architect of the modern-day anti-immigrant movement. BorderHawk has been getting airtime from such conservative news outlets as One America News. Its footage was also used in a segment on Laura Ingram's Fox News program in November 2023, and I will add a couple months later, we actually did an in-person interview on air about some subsequent reporting that we did, and it was a rousing success. I'm told Laura goes through our content and footage all the time, so we'll be back on there soon enough, I would imagine. BorderHawk operates a website aggregating immigration news and commentary, publishing original content on issues like migration in Europe, and doing live segments at the US-Mexico border. They have been able to earn spots on mainstream news programs as well as other conservative-leaning web shows such as Sebastian Gorka's America First. These are still the words of the SPLC. A Hate Watch review of BorderHawk News' output and activities shows it embodies a xenophobic agenda consistent with its founding as part of the Tanton anti-immigrant network. BorderHawk appears to subscribe to the racist Great Replacement conspiracy theory and ideas of there being a migrant invasion happening at the US southern border. They put quotes around invasion. They put quotes around the Great Replacement. They want you to believe that those things don't exist.
Right.
In December of 2023 post entitled, "We Need Your Help to Stop the Invasion," BorderHawk staff wrote, The Great Replacement is real. The same content is pinned to the top of the group's X page, Twitter. The Great Replacement is a racist conspiracy theory that claims that white people in white majority nations are being replaced by non-white immigrants and people of color who are often framed as being inferior to the dominant population and culture. That's the end of the SPLC's introduction to BorderHawk. Of course, the Great Replacement is real, and the SPLC plays a key role in its implementation, chiefly by trying to destroy anyone who dares even hint at the existence of this open conspiracy. Despite having more than 500,000 followers on Twitter, the SPLC post of the article racked up a stunning 12 likes. And 5 comments, all of which were in support of BorderHawk. Some of that backstory about BorderHawk is true. I was brought on board at John Tanton's organization, US Incorporated, in 2020, as Izzy mentioned, to launch BorderHawk. Before the unfortunate closure of US Inc. in 2022, we were able to rescue BorderHawk, spinning it out into a standalone nonprofit organization, which I now head, thanks a great deal to these gentlemen here that were aforementioned, Dale and John. Thank you so much for that opportunity to keep us going when the doors were closing. We really appreciate that. BorderHawk is a trim outfit with just a few contributors and reporters, but we're now regarded as one of the best immigration and border-specific news outlets in the country, partly because we have so little competition, and largely because we're very good at what we do and we're getting better at it every day. Ironically, virtually everyone who works for and with BorderHawk is either Hispanic or married to a Hispanic. So we may not be welcomed by these racist and white nationalist factions mentioned by the SPLC much longer when that fact becomes public. Immigration has finally become a front and center issue in American politics. It's unfortunate that it had to become an existential crisis, as it has largely over the last 4 years, for the electorate to finally realize our way of life is literally being stolen from us, but better late than never, I suppose. Many Americans are waking up to the reality that every state is a border state and every town is now a border town. Here in Michigan, you've had quite a few recent horror stories tied directly to illegal immigration, and I'll just run through a very small handful. Many of these stories never reach the light of day. What we do at BorderHawk is we try to dig these out from local media, from local officials, explaining that, oh, that rape that happened down the street, or that, person that was killed in a DUI that was actually someone not supposed to be in the country legally. Mainstream media very rarely picks that stuff up. We're doing our best to expose that at the national level. So in February, 19 people facing deportation were stopped near Traverse City. Many of you heard that story. The bus was swerving on the road. The driver apparently did not have a driver's license. We think that he probably was also in the country illegally. So that's a story that you probably all heard about, because that's pretty close to home here. In March, a fatal hit and run took place in Grand Rapids. That got very little coverage. That was actually committed by an illegal. And that story didn't even come out for 2 more months. So it happened in March. They had the surveillance footage. They finally identified the suspect, and it turned out it was an illegal. Also in March, right around that time, a much more high-profile situation, also in Grand Rapids, where you had a young lady who originally was reported that she was carjacked and her body was left on the side of the road, and that the suspect was an illegal alien. We later found out they did have a romantic relationship. It seems to be some sort of lover's quarrel, and we never found out. The victim may also have been in the country illegally based on the research that I've done, but we did never find that out and pinpoint that, but we do know that the suspect was. In April, an illegal alien was arrested for sexually assaulting 2 preteen girls during a Michigan home invasion. If memory serves correctly, he fled to Indiana or Ohio, and eventually they dug him out. He broke into, I believe it was a mobile home in a mobile park, and attacked 2 girls that were sleeping in there, preteen girls. In June, an illegal alien was arrested, now this is of course this month, was arrested for killing a mother and daughter in a horrible car accident in Macomb County. Box truck, he didn't slow, in a construction zone, rear-ended a vehicle carrying an 88-year-old woman and her 63-year-old daughter, and both were killed and pronounced dead at the scene. Terrible, terrible crash. And then, of course, it's not just the crime, it's not these horror stories, it's other things going on in Michigan. Apparently, you just had your first population growth in many years, and that was due exclusively to immigration, the amount of new immigrants coming into the state. You have had your issues with the Chi-Com-backed EV plant that was fought against vociferously in downstate, and they actually were successful in preventing them from building that facility. That, of course, probably would have meant an influx of Chinese workers, if I had to guess, that would have probably been staying in the area. And then, of course, you have your issues down in the Detroit area, Hamtramck, infamous at this point, and Izzy wrote a story for us about that not too long ago, where the Muslim mayor of the city decided that he could not ban ritual animal sacrifice, and the courts ruled in his favor, if I'm not mistaken. So these are just some of the examples of how immigration is changing the state of Michigan for the worse. I'm of the opinion that irreparable damage has likely already been inflicted upon our great nation. But perhaps we can at least slow the bleeding if there's enough political will and political power to do so. Advocating for true reform, a radical shift in how our borders are defended and immigration laws are enforced, is still legal for now, sort of. For this presentation, I want to walk you through some of our biggest reports and most important reports from the past few months to show you what we're accomplishing on a shoestring budget with a skeleton crew. While most of the mainstream media and even larger conservative outlets either gloss over, ignore, or outright hide the ongoing invasion from the public eye. We've broken some massive stories that have racked up tens of millions of views and drawn favorable attention and coverage from the likes of Elon Musk, Donald Trump, RFK Jr., Carrie Lake, the top hosts at Fox News, One American News, Newsmax, Alex Jones, Matt Walsh, Jack Posobiec, to name but a few. So we're going to get into these reports if I can get this page turned here. The head of a highly esteemed conservative publication many of you would know recently expressed his dismay that border and immigration reporting is still being left primarily to rogue operations, in his words, like BorderHawk, and he said he doesn't think anyone is doing it quite like we are. So I'm going to get the multimedia set up and hope the tech cooperates. Crossed here, right? Holding up. Okay. If you have any issues with the volume on this, let me know. We can turn it up, turn it down if you can't hear. We're going to run through some reports. Nothing's particularly long. But the first thing that I want to show you is what sets us apart from virtually every other immigration reporter, outlet, independent outlet, whatever it is. We do it a little bit differently because we actually go into Mexico and we have a correspondent based in Mexico. We also have contacts in Mexico. So what you'll see these days, like on Fox News, you'll see Bill Malugin is doing a great job at the border. We commend him for that, but he'll never go into Mexico. And the Mexican reporters are really bummed out about that because they say, you'll get a completely different perspective if you come over here. Most of the indie folks, they don't go into Mexico. It is a bit dangerous. If you don't have proper guides, proper contacts in the area, it is very dangerous. Fortunately, we do have some of those guides, and we don't mind taking some chances. And so our correspondent in Mexico, his name is Efrain Gonzalez, absolutely fantastic, based right across from Eagle Pass in Piedras Negras, which is the border town in Mexico. Many of you will probably have heard of Eagle Pass by now because leading into the end of the year, they were averaging 2,000 illegal crossings per day in a town of about 30,000 residents. Absolute pandemonium. Things have slowed down a little bit. We'll explain why that's happened. But at the end of the year, we broke a succession of massive reports, month after month after month, leading into the shutdown. And we're told by some of the people on the ground that our reporting heavily impacted what was going on there, and the optics were just so bad that they had to do something about it. And so the first that you'll see, actually, in October, we were the only news outlet to get a camera on Border Patrol bringing a forklift to the border and lifting the razor wire that Texas had erected on the border in order to allow hundreds of illegals to run into the country. Bombshell footage, this one went gangbusters, After that, you're going to see a shelter in Piedras Negras, which is basically where every illegal that has passed in the mass groups entering Eagle Pass, they've come through this particular shelter. We found out that at that shelter, many of them were being provided with GPS coordinates by unknown hands. We're still not sure who was doing it. We think it was either the Mexican officials or NGOs or working in conjunction with each other. And there's even indications that it may have been partially coordinated on the other side of the water in the US, because every time these big groups would amass on the banks, Border Patrol knew exactly where to be waiting for them in order to welcome them and to process them and release most of them into the country. And the third report you're going to see in this succession, they're all 50 seconds, is in tracking that towards the end of the year, our reporter was embedding with these groups as they were heading down to the Rio, and he discovered towards the end of December, he was with a group and there were Mexican soldiers stationed on the footpaths waiting for the groups to come in order to guard the pass, in order to make it easier for them to reach the water. So there was collusion at the highest levels, the Mexican government facilitating them on their last steps before reaching the US. What happened in January was those soldiers, as we'll explain shortly, their mission flipped, and the same guys that were guarding the pass to allow illegals to come through were then guarding the pass to prevent them from coming through. So what we think is that a deal was struck between the Biden administration and the AMLO administration to kind of shut things down in that area. So I'm going to run you through these three in succession. The tech couldn't be perfect, of course, but we're going to get it. Got to get that speaker going so you can hear this guy.
You on Bluetooth, Dad?
Yeah, we got it. I think it just powered down because it's been asleep for a while. Okay, let's try that again. And if it's too loud, like I said, you just let me know, all right?
I'm Efrain Gonzalez, correspondent with BorderHawk News. This is how mass migrant crossings are carried out at Eagle Pass.
We followed this large group of migrants who left the only shelter that is open in Piedras Negras just at sunset. Most of these people do not know how to get to the river. However, through GPS, they obtain the exact location where forklift tractors raised the razor wire last October.
¿Saben el camino al río?
No, señor, no. Estamos con GPS y no con guía.
We accompanied this caravan that walked for an hour in the darkness to reach the crossing point. The migrants said they were angry that Mexican authorities sent them to cross into this dangerous area of the river at night.
¿Por qué migración hizo eso? De sacarnos de la casa de las monjas a que nosotros cruzáramos el río sabiendo que eso estaba hondo, cuando la cual hay muchas personas que cargan niños.
The crossings of these GPS-guided caravans have become much more frequent in Eagle Pass this November.
Waves of humanity running across the river. We're going to run that Border Patrol lifting the razor wire here.
I'm Efrain Gonzalez, correspondent with BorderHawk News. These are exclusive images of how mass crossings of hundreds of migrants are being carried out in recent days at Eagle Pass, raising the barbed wire with machinery.
This huge caravan of around 300 migrants crossed into Eagle Pass thanks to Border Patrol agents lifting the barbed wire. The hundreds of migrants crossed in a few minutes, this being the fourth massive crossing that our cameras witnessed in the last days of October. Previously, these caravans are sent to uninhabited areas of the Rio Grande, where Border Patrol awaits them with forklift tractors. Given these facilities, migrants say they prefer to cross the river instead of processing legal entry.
¿El plan cuál es ahora? ¿Cruzar por el río Bravo con sus niños o CBP igual?
Cruzar por el río Bravo y no, primeramente en el nombre de Dios. Se tarda mucho y nosotros no tenemos recursos para quedarnos.
Somehow these large groups of migrants are informed about the place and time when the forklifts raise the barbed wire to cross in drops.
Due to our tech issue there, we're now flopped, but as we saw in the report that I showed you, that was actually the following month we learned how they knew where to cross was, of course, the GPS coordinates. And we're going to go to this third report here.
I'm Efrain Gonzalez, correspondent with BorderHawk News. This is how large groups of migrants continue to cross into Eagle Pass even at the end of the year.
We joined one of the huge caravans that crossed to Eagle Pass in the last days of December. The migrants showed us the GPS they obtained when leaving a shelter to find a distant location on the Rio Grande.
¿Quién tiene el GPS, amigo? ¿Quién no tiene?
We found Mexican soldiers who were already waiting for the hundreds of people just to guard their crossing. Pollution has spread in this uninhabited area of the Rio Grande due to the crossing of thousands of migrants. This was the last mass crossing in daylight that we captured on our cameras at the end of December, before the start of operation by Mexican authorities that have momentarily reduced the arrival of migrants.
So you see there Mexican soldiers guarding the footpaths. And as I mentioned, this was one of the final crossings of December. We don't have these mass crossings right now into Eagle Pass because, like I said, their mission changed. And we think that a deal was struck between the Biden administration and the Mexicans to at least enforce in the border states where the Mexican government is in control. That's not necessarily the case because other border states are more in the control of the cartels. And that's why we've seen in large part that the flows have shifted now to Arizona, to New Mexico, to California, because those states are controlled by the cartels. Those agreements are not in place, of course, and also because Texas is doing a better job enforcing on their side of the border. So when we went there, we actually visited that horribly polluted crossing area because there wasn't really anyone around at that time. The Mexican soldiers were actually quite nice to us. They let us look around, very polite. They didn't mind the media being there, which was great. And so while we were there, we were in Eagle Pass, we shot a report at where the border wall just ends. It's built, but it's not built all the way. We want everyone to see this because it's startling.
Dan Lyman here with BorderHawk. I'm here on the ground in Eagle Pass, Texas, right on the city limits. As you can see, I'm standing in front of the wall that was constructed by the Trump administration. In the distance there, you can actually see Mexican territory. The Mexican flag is waving there. But I just want to show our viewers something that is just so absurd, and it really highlights how insane this border crisis is, because we see that on this side, we have barrier. Over there, it's actually U.S. territory before you reach the Rio Grande. But if you just follow me here, you discover that the barrier ends. There's a massive gap. There's a road that goes all the way down to the Rio Grande. So anyone who wants to make their way across can walk up this road and illegally enter the U.S., bypassing the border barrier. What's the point of building it if we're not going to build it all the way? Totally insane.
It's disturbing. A serious country wouldn't do this. A serious country would have a wall, maybe even taller, maybe built completely out of concrete that didn't have gaps like this. We're going to show you some other gaps in the wall. This one's in Sunland Park. That's Juarez on the left, one of the most dangerous cities in Mexico. That's New Mexico on the right. The barrier ends here, and you can see right at the bottom of the shot there's a little concrete bollard, and then there's nothing. There's just sand. And so while we were shooting this shot, actually, at night, there were cartel spotters on top of the buildings watching us, taking photos of us, videoing us, because they like to know what's going on the other side for the next group of people that they're going to bring through, or the next bundle of drugs they're going to smuggle through. So another example of the border wall just abruptly ending. Taking you back to the shelter in Piedras Negras, we were the first American journalists to bring cameras inside the shelter because we have good connections. Efrain took us in, very dangerous situation, and we were told no one else has been in there with cameras that speaks English. We actually went in. This is a bit longer report. I'm just going to roll a couple of minutes for you so you can see what it looks like inside. But when we went, as I mentioned, the flows they're down a little bit. There were a couple hundred of migrants in there preparing to enter the U.S. Most of them right now are either entering in smaller groups on the outskirts of Eagle Pass. You still see a lot of buses in Maverick County. Every few days there's a couple hundred, but it's not like it was. Most of them are entering the U.S. legally using the CBP One app. So what they do is they're outside the country, They have the help of translators and NGO activists and all sorts of people in this shelter that help them. They file for an appointment and on the CBP-1 app, Customs and Border Protection. They wait for that appointment to be approved, and they go in groups, and this is a sanctioned event, every day, groups of 30 or 40, twice a day, go to the International Bridge, they walk across, at the halfway point they're met by an American CBP officer and they're walked into the US. They're given a notice to appear, and then they're released into the country. So most of the ones that are waiting in the shelter are doing it the legal way. Of course, this is just whitewashing of illegal immigration. I'm going to give you a little peek inside the shelter, and then we'll move on. So we were just inside the shelter here in Piedras Negras, filming an interview, and our security team advised us to leave immediately. We were getting triangulated by multiple men on cell phones, and apparently a couple of them had some pretty large knives, so we had to get out of there quickly. It is a little bit seedy in there, and we felt like it was time to go. So apologies on cutting that interview short. No problem. They painted over the signs that we saw last time. Yeah. Little mural. Flags. This is a little shop that they go into to get supplies, right? When they come out for food and things like that. These are it. And they try it.
You know this place, the shelter.
¿Cómo?
You know this
Yes,
place?
I remember we had a sign and we knocked on the window last time, but didn't come in. They're painting the flags, it looks like.
Yeah, the Virgen, la Virgen de Guadalupe.
Sí, Guadalupe.
Guadalupe, Virgen de Guadalupe, this is the. Gracias, vamos a pegar, venga.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Gracias. Buenos días. Buenos días.
I'll give you a little narration here. If anyone can't see, let me know. Someone's blocking it over there, probably blocking the projector. But we went in. This is one of the courtyards. We talked to some of the guys here. We were looking at these maps that are provided by the NGOs, Doctors Without Borders,
They're taking their train.
the American Red Cross, Catholic Charities. They're all heavily involved in this shelter, which is run by a nun, but really it's run by all of them. The men just loiter around all day. They were nice enough to us. These guys up front.
South to like Tabasco.
Right now they are.
But these maps you can find all throughout Central America and Mexico, and they tell prospective illegals, migrants on their way to the U.S., where they can find aid, shelter, places to stop, friendlies to help them along the way.
So all this right now is over capacity, just waiting. It's a time bomb right now. It's a matter of time before the mass rush makes it all to the U.S.
The spring surge.
Yeah.
So we talked to these gentlemen here. This one, he explained to us, he knew exactly where he was going. He was going to California, and he had a job waiting for him at the Ritz at Lake Tahoe, and he had family waiting for him as well. So he was all hooked up, ready to go, waiting for his CBP-1 appointment.
5 o'clock in the morning.
Everybody?
No, some got and some don't have.
What are you going to do when you get to US?
Well, I got my family up there.
Oh, no kidding. Where do they live?
They live in California.
Which part?
Nevada City.
Nevada City? Okay.
Yeah.
Are you going to work?
Going to work in a hotel there.
Oh, nice. You're all set up?
Yeah, set up.
You just waited, biding time, I
I
guess.
just up the reach and I got work there.
So back in November, December, this place was to capacity. It was in the thousands. Right now, there's probably 200, 300 max. And what they have now is migrants that are doing their CBP-1 process. They're essentially being forced to do it because of the operations happening on the Mexican side, and then also on the U.S. side at Shelby Park. So right now, that's the only alternative they have is to do CBP-1 and try to enter legally into the U.S.
Mm-hmm. So presumably it would be like maybe a few hundred would be capacity, but at times they've had to put 1,000, 2,000.
When it was back in November, December,
Right.
the place was packed to capacity.
At the height of the surge, they were moving 1,000 to 2,000 people in twice a day. So sometimes 4,000 people through this shelter in a given day. It's going to take you into the other courtyard so you can see it, and then we'll move on from here. This is where most of them were congregated. Families, children, people from all over the world.
Hola, buenas.
Nobody really noticed us until they noticed us. And we got surrounded by some guys with knives, and that's when we decided to leave.
Hey, we're good, right?
You get the point. You can watch that online. All of our reports are online at BorderHawk.news, BorderHawk.blog. Everything's on there. On Twitter, if you're a Twitter user, everything's on there. I want to take you now down the border to El Paso. Our reporter, a bunch of us went for this visit down in Eagle Pass, but a bunch of us had to get back. But we had a reporter, my brother, Wid, many of you have met him. He spent 6 more weeks at the border solo, with a visit from Izzy for a couple of days for interpretation purposes, but mostly he was out there alone. And in this video, he was alone. And he was in El Paso. And there's a church in El Paso where illegals gather. They're allowed to. The law at this point doesn't allow for immigration authorities to enter religious premises, churches, things like that. It's considered a sanctuary. And so the illegals gather there knowing that nothing's going to be done to them. And actually, we found out it's a little worse than that. But so he decided to take a drive by this church and just see what was going on. And it was packed with illegals hanging out, food trucks all over the place. It's a party out there. And so as he was making his way by, his intention was only to just film as he drove by slowly and continue on. Well, he got stuck behind behind a food truck, actually. And he was trapped directly in front of the shelter with his camera rolling for what he hoped would be a few seconds. It ended up being a little bit longer. And a couple of young men who presumably are either criminals or prospective criminals in the U.S. and not here legally, could be gang members. We've heard all about the gangs that are coming in, criminals that are coming in. They actually didn't like the fact that he was filming from his vehicle, and they approached his vehicle. They started cursing at him and making gestures in Spanish, and then they circled the vehicle and tried to force entry. They were pulling on the door handles, they were pounding on the windows. Fortunately, he was able to escape before they were able to gain entry, and they ended up throwing a rock at his car on the way by. So this report is a little jarring, about 90 seconds, but you can see what it was like. And when he reported this incident, he got away, he called El Paso PD, and he said, hey, this is what just happened. They just shrugged their shoulders, basically said, this happens all the time, not much we can do. So American citizens have, less of a right to law enforcement than these people, apparently.
¿Es ilegal grabarme? ¿Sabías eso? ¿Sabías que es ilegal grabar?
You can see 2 of them circling around the rear of the vehicle. Trying the door handles.
Is this the church in El Paso?
Yes, sir. That's a rock hitting the vehicle. That's the rock. Hate to think what would have happened if a door was unlocked. Really don't know. Like I said, El Paso PD said, nothing we can do. That's obviously a choice. Also in El Paso, this is not our footage, this was taken by the great James Breeden, but many of you will have heard of, in March, the border riot. Hundreds of illegals stormed through. National Guard was totally overrun. We're told that many of the National Guard, even though they carry rifles, the rifles don't have ammunition in them. That has been corroborated by some of our sources. Some of them do, so that's not like a blanket statement, but many of them do not. And of course, in this case, they were totally underpowered to handle this group who overran them, was stomping on them, and as most recently, hundreds of them had their cases dismissed by an activist judge in El Paso, so there were almost no consequences for virtually anyone here. But the reason I show you this is because this happened at, if memory serves, Gate 36. It's one of the gates in the border barrier, and this happened in March, and a couple weeks later, we turned up at Gate 36 to see what was going on, because we were told after that riot, oh, big crackdown, they're rolling out the razor wire, more National Guard being deployed to the area. We wanted to see that for ourselves. So our reporter went out there at night to see what was going on. What he found out is groups were being walked through that gate, that same gate where there was a riot weeks earlier. They were just congregating at the gate, and if they wait long enough, under cover of darkness in this case, Border Patrol and the local sheriff walk them through the gate, load them into sheriff's vans, and take them into the country.
Right here is gate 36, and this is the site of where several hundred migrants, illegals, rushed and actually attacked National Guard troops just about a week or so ago. So this is the same site. So they're continuing to cross in this area. We just saw 3 vans full of National Guard show up as sort of reinforcements to this area. There's a bunch down there. If you go downhill just a touch, they're all staging down there.
So you see these sheriff's vans pulling away full of illegals, and then the next round of reinforcements for National Guard being brought in to stage for overnight or for the next day. It's kind of absurd though. What's the point of putting all these National Guardsmen there if they're not going to do anything about it, if they're going to be the ones walking people through? Security theater, that's what we call it. Let's keep going down the border. Let's go to Arizona. This is the Mariposa Slab. The Mariposa Slab is another jarring gap in the border wall. The wall, if I understand correctly, was incomplete at the time of changing of the guard in Washington, D.C., and they were racing to close this gap. It's about 100 feet wide to finish the Trump barrier, to conjoin it. And of course, on day one, President Biden shut that all down, and so the gap was not closed. And because there is an opening there, cartels and smugglers are exploiting it all day, every day, just walking groups of people through because there's nothing stopping them. And so they come through, they walk through this gap, they walk up onto this dirt road, and they wait for Border Patrol to pick them up. We caught a couple of these crossings, but they go on all day, like I said.
Group is crossing in front of us right now. There is a gentleman on a motorcycle across that obviously funneled them down here. As you can see behind me, the group is going to walk up that hill where we saw about 50 migrants earlier, and they are getting picked up by Border Patrol. The coyote is still in front of us. He's on a cell phone right now.
That's the coyote that delivered this
photos
group.
Of us for sure. But as you can see,
he took photos and videos of our reporter
over my shoulder here and get picked up. They're going to join the additional group. So we've seen about 60 migrants this afternoon. With Lyman with BorderHawk. This is our second take of this. Earlier we were trying to shoot this shot, and at the same time illegal aliens crossed directly in front of us, about 10, to join the group of about 50 that we saw on top of the hill, as well as the coyote that kind of came as well on a motorcycle. So we had to exit to the vehicles just for safety purposes. So again, just walk with me very briefly here. You can see the fence on my left side here. This is the Trump fence. And then this area in particular has a lot of traffic. They call this the Mariposa Slab. It's so famous because it's so open. As you can see, we've seen about 60 crossings here today alone. But as you can see behind me on the shoulder, there is nothing here between here and the other side of Nogales, Mexico. It's wide open, completely available to the migrants to kind of be in this area here.
So that coyote is going to come back as well.
Total insanity. Gaps in the wall.
All day, every day.
If we're not going to close it, we should have Border Patrol there, right? They're not. We should have somebody there. And they should be working to close it immediately, right? Of course, that hasn't happened for nearly 4 years. Izzy was actually down there at this time. She was participating in this hit, and she actually interviewed some of these illegals in Spanish. We just got a quick clip of that here for you.
La prensa, podemos preguntarles unas preguntas. ¿Está bien? ¿Sí? ¿De dónde son ustedes, señor? De México. ¿Todos son de México? También son de México. ¿Y costó dinero para cruzar? ¿Les costó dinero?
So these are some of the families that you hear about. The majority of people coming across right now are single adults. All of them were telling her that they actually came from Mexico. Of course, we have well over 140 nationalities represented in illegal crossings under the Biden administration, but still a ton of people are coming from Mexico. So while Wood was down there and taking this all in, realizing that really the Border Patrol, I mean, their mission right now is really convoluted, and they're not doing a great job because the mission is so terrible, but also they're totally overwhelmed and they're totally understaffed. So I'm going to show you just a couple of illegal crossings that were just unfolding, and Wood was watching, and eventually he got so frustrated with this, seeing that nothing was going to be done to these people. These were prospective gotaways. They were just going to slip into the country. So he started actually notifying Border Patrol when he saw a crossing, and it was actually successful a couple times. In one case, you'll see they got assets up in the air, and they were able to track some of these people down, and then he was actually able to participate at a distance in an actual bust by calling in Border Patrol and hanging out and waiting for them to come, and they actually apprehended these people. So round of applause to Witt for actually enforcing the border for a few minutes there. BorderHawk, doing the job that Border Patrol agents can't do. These guys just ran into the country. This was New Mexico, if I'm not mistaken. They did get a CBP chopper up in the sky, but he said they did not catch these guys. I'm going to show you another one here. This one's a little crazy. You're not going to be able to see the people that are trying to enter, but they parked two cars right here. That's Mexico on that side. They parked two cars here at the fence, and they tried to gain entry. They're unsuccessful. But what was crazy about it was there's a Border Patrol truck sitting right there, and the Border Patrol agent made no effort to intercept them or to question them or drive over and make them, to scare them away. And what he found out was, after approaching the agent when these people gave up, was that the agent was literally sleeping in the front seat of the car.
There's about 10 people at the wall. They just got out of two vehicles on the other side. They're looking for an entrance.
You can see them running back to the vehicle.
They were not able to cross. It was not wide enough.
Now we'll show you how close this truck was. They weren't bothered by it.
Border Patrol van, right there.
Asleep at the wheel, literally. We'd actually called this one in. It was a successful bust.
Driving around Sunland Park here, we saw a guy running through the shrubbery and the desert area here. We saw Border Patrol and told them, and they've shown up.
There's 3 or 4 illegals. They were wearing special slippers that they use. They strapped to the bottom of their shoes to not leave footprints.
Looks like there were 4 people apprehended by Border Patrol. We only saw one of them running. Looks like they have 4, and they're heading back to the vehicles right now.
So successful bust. Bravo on that. It's going to be our final report that I'm going to show you. We're pretty proud of this one. It's called Cartel Mountain and the Invasion of New Mexico. You never hear about New Mexico. You might hear a little bit about it right now, but it gets very little coverage. But it's totally inundated as well, especially because the flows are moving west from Texas. And so Sunland Park is right on the outskirts of El Paso, but it's in New Mexico, and New Mexico is doing absolutely nothing to enforce the border the way that Texas is. And so there's this mountain that the backside of the mountain is in Mexico, and the front side ends in Sunland Park, and it's called Mount Cristo Rey. And it's very popular with Catholic pilgrims. They are known to hike this mountain, and there's crosses and different prayers to be said along the way. Well, now that mountain is referred to by the locals and by Border Patrol as Cartel Mountain because the cartels have assumed control of the mountain. And recently, Fox News went to Sunland Park and was interviewing Border Patrol while the illegals were running by them down this mountain, and they said, the mountain is theirs, we've lost control. Nothing is being done. So Witt actually didn't realize quite how dangerous the mountain was and hiked it himself a couple of times to get some stunning footage. He was told afterwards by a U.S. Marine who does this sort of thing, and also by Border Patrol, that he was insane for doing that alone. When you pull into the parking lot, there is signage asking any prospective hikers to notify the local PD that you're going to be on the mountain because it's so dangerous. The website for this mountain also cautions you to not hike alone, only hike during the daytime, and preferably when there's security or police in the area because of the amount of crime that is happening, violent crime, and human trafficking and human smuggling. And he actually encountered many people on this mountain after he got a lay of the land, and he was talking to them as they were preparing for their hikes. And he said, "Are you aware of what is going on this mountain?" And nobody knew. And some of them were so startled by what he told them, they just got back in their cars and left. So he probably did them a service. But this is what's going on in New Mexico. It's jarring because there is just nothing stopping these people at this point.
BorderHawk takes you to one of the most dangerous places on the southern border. On the west side of El Paso, Texas is Sunland Park, New Mexico, which shares a border with Puerto de Anapra, a colony in the city of Juarez. With a population of roughly 30,000, Puerto de Anapra is a squatter settlement that is built right up to the border wall, and many of the residents are migrants. New arrivals to the region often land in these unregulated colonies. The developments are characterized by illegal land occupation, self-built housing, and they lack basic infrastructure or human services. The border wall divides the two regions, but what is unique about this area is the wall abruptly ending. The area is a hotbed for illegal crossings and significant human smuggling operations. Scouts, coyotes, falcones control the colony, and it is considered one of the poorest communities within the city.
We just got off of Mount Cristo Rey, where we saw a group of about 12 using the trail and then heading down towards the town of, I guess that would be Sunland Park on the west side of El Paso here. I guess one of the stories here of Sunland Park, like it's just so constant. There's so much going on. There's constant trafficking of people. And Border Patrol, is doing a good job on the ground, it seems, but there's not enough of them. I spent the last 15 minutes looking for someone to tell that I saw a group of about 12 heading down towards the town, and I still haven't seen anybody yet. The majority of illegal alien crossings at the Anapra Gap and down neighboring Mount Cristo Rey are trying to avoid detection due to prior criminal histories or immigration issues. A local middle school in New Mexico had to go into lockdown 2 times in the month of March alone due to illegals hiding on the campus. The open wall, the proximity of the colony of Anapra and the city of Juarez, and continued efforts by the state of Texas will continue making Sunland Park one of the busiest sectors for those who do not want to be caught. Border Patrol agents on the ground tell BorderHawk it's the Wild West out here.
The Wild West. You can hit that light if somebody knows. Oh yeah, perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you. Got a little bit more for you. It's our conclusion. People ask me, why do you care? What do you hope to accomplish with what you do, with your work? I actually got that question multiple times in a day recently. I had to think about it. We're watching our nation being dragged under the waves, figuratively and literally by relentless tides of humanity that won't stop coming until someone or something makes them stop. This has been foisted upon us against our will. We were never asked. We are victims of one of the gravest injustices, one of the greatest crimes in the history of mankind. It's enraging to encounter story after story of American lives being destroyed by foreign criminals, especially those of children. We witnessed the red carpet being rolled out for invaders, while our people, American citizens, veterans, suffer, and are forced to foot the bill at the same time. We see the condition of small towns and big cities across the country that are being overwhelmed and trashed by invaders from across the globe. The actual southern border is a burned out dystopic wasteland. Cities on the Mexican side are destitute, crime-ridden nightmares. Cities on the US side, like El Paso, Eagle Pass, and Tucson, have become dangerous, filthy places. And now many cities further inland, such as Austin, Phoenix, Tucson, they hardly look much better. The texture of American life is being destroyed and will be lost forever at this rate. We're finding that Americans are desperate for authentic border and immigration coverage. We get kudos and gratitude every day now from people, from readers, from supporters, viewers. It's the woman in the Eagle Pass Hotel who saw us all wearing BorderHawk shirts and stopped us and said, "Thank you so much for what you're doing." It's the plumber in Tucson who is Anon online, who goes by Bandwagon, and he is doing a heroic effort by himself to just videotape everything that he sees going on in Tucson. And when we got there to give it some real air, he said, "Thank you so much for being here." He was so grateful because nobody is supporting them. Nobody's getting the word out. We have Border Patrol agents in New Mexico who are so appreciative of our coverage. They're cheering, they're watching our videos in the patrol office, which is probably a no-no. But they told us that they're so happy that we're bringing some light to the situation in New Mexico specifically. We have the migrant sympathetic French documentarians that followed us around for a couple of days. And they were very kind of pro-migrant, not really into illegal immigration, but definitely pro-migrant and very sympathetic humanitarian aspect. And they said we changed their minds about the border issues, and they've been doing this a long time. And we get messages from people on social media saying simply, "Thanks for saying illegal aliens, not migrants." And it is an important distinction. Migrants has maybe a place, but as soon as they illegally cross that southern border, we call them illegals. We call them invaders in private. The tide is turning. In recent polling last week conducted by CBS YouGov, 62% of respondents said they supported mass deportations, including nearly half of Democrats. This is the number one or number two issue with the economy now in this election, and it's the same in Europe. We're seeing that Europarl elections were last week, this week, and it was a rise of anti-mass migration parties across Europe, and that's a good sign. Does that mean anything's going to change? I have no idea, but we do know the sentiment is there, we know how the voters are voting, and we know that they don't support this, and they're desperate for it to end. Even local media outlets are starting to do a little bit better job noting when a criminal is an illegal. They're starting to say in their reports, more so, at least in my experience, than they used to, because maybe even some of these reporters are realizing it's hitting pretty close to home. Every town is a border town. Places that you never heard of stuff like this. Places in Utah, places in rural Wisconsin, places in Maine, New England, across New England. We know about all the big cities, we know about Chicago, we know about New York. They're all terrible. But it's hitting the little towns too. It's hitting Macomb County, Michigan. It's hitting Grand Rapids. Serious, serious issues impacting American lives, American children, American women, American veterans, you name it. There could come a day when I stop caring so much and relegate the country that I grew up in, that my parents grew up in, to the past, as a bittersweet memory of a bygone era. But for now, we fight. For our ancestors, for the courageous conquerors, the settlers, and the explorers who built a magnificent civilization for us against all the odds. And we fight for our children, our grandchildren, and their grandchildren. Thank you. I'll be happy to take some questions. I know